Great, good evening, good evening. So glad all of you could be here today. If you'd like, let's just take a half a moment and try to congregate a little closer to the stage here so we can hear Secretary Jewell's remarks in a bit. So I have had a few conversations tonight, and I was talking with some folks from the National Park Conservation Association, I think someone else from Sierra Club, and we started to remark about the number of events that have happened within the Seattle area about the Elwha, and how all of those events have been pretty much sold out. I started to think about it. There was the event at the Neptune Theater where the scientists spoke. That one, there's a line out the door. There was Linda Mapes. How many different readings did you have where it was standing room only about your book? The Burt Museum had an opening on the Elwha. That was sold out. And of course, Jessica and John, the Return of the River at Town Hall on a rainy February night. They were scalping tickets outside on 8th Avenue. And then another event was science. There you go. Thank you. There's more. It's sold out. It's fantastic. And we continue that streak tonight. Benaroya called us on Tuesday and said they're shutting down the ticket booth. They're sold out again. It's just amazing. So something about this is that the Pacific Northwest loves the Elwha story. They love the Elwha story. My name's Stephen Stroifert, and I'm the Vice President of Education for NatureBridge, and also the director of our campus in Olympic National Park. We bring students. Each year we bring about 110 schools, maybe 5,000 students and teachers out for our environmental science programs, and many of them get out onto the Elwha. And as I think about what our efforts are, we're really playing the long game here, the long game of developing the next generation of environmental stewards. Quick story, though. My first day of work for NatureBridge was on the 10th of September of 2011. I think you know what that date was. That was the day of the celebrations before the dam started coming down the next day. Delightful day. First day on the job, drove out, met some staff and board, got my obligatory NatureBridge black vest with the logo, a stack of business cards. It was a great day, and it culminated in an event that the Lower Elwha Clallam tribe put on. Again, standing room only, and the speaker that night was Senator Bradley. And I think Senator Bradley summed up best as he concluded his speech why the Elwha story results in sold-out efforts throughout the Pacific Northwest and why it's such an important story. And he did it so eloquently, simply that, as it says on our invitation tonight, the great gift of the Elwha. And you know the next word. Let's say it together. Hope. Right? The great gift of the Elwha, hope. So, Senator Bradley, I'm not sure if you remember that night like I do, but after you finished your speech, you stood off to the side of the event hall, and you were standing by yourself. And I said, I'm going to go talk to Senator Bradley. And I went over, and I thanked him for his words, and I shared with him that in environmental education, there are so many things that are doom and gloom. And tonight, with the Elwha, we have a story of hope, and that his words just encapsulated that. And then he asked me if I had a business card. It was my first day on the job. I had one. I just got it. In fact, it was the very first card that I passed out in my job. And you know, you'd think like maybe if I was a professional basketball player or something, that you might call that my rookie card. So, Senator Bradley, I hope you hung on to that. That could be worth tens of dollars someday. But the piece about that is that with that card, he didn't stop at hope. He asked how he could help. He sent me the copy of his speech. I shared it with many and inspired many because of his words. And when we asked him, would you come back and speak in Seattle? He said yes. And preceding that day, all the work that Senator Bradley did, but all the people in this room that combined hope and work and action to make those dams come down and that river flow free. That is the power of this story. And I think of those people who worked hard, and I'm not sure if she's here yet tonight, but just wanted to make sure that we recognize Tribal Chairwoman Frances Charles, who perhaps has the strongest and most consistent and most persuasive of those voices. So this is why I think this is a special night for us, and I would like to ask Secretary Jewell to join me here on stage. And when I think about hope and help, and I think about when you went to Washington, D.C., you carried all our hopes to D.C., and you helped us imagine what a government could do that would help get kids outside to learn and play and serve, and how we treasure our public lands. So thank you for cherishing that hope and for all the work you did, and most of all, welcome home, Sally.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Stephen. And I'm standing on a little step stool here, and I'm sure that Bill Bradley, if he were here, would not be needing this. But I'm glad to have it so I can actually see him out there. He's probably sitting down. It is great to be home, and it's great to be at this event. And I just want to start by thanking my very good friend and colleague from the National Park Second Century Commission, colleague from the REI Board, hiking partner today in the Mountains of Sound Greenway, former chair of the NatureBridge Board, and a current NatureBridge Board member, Stephen Lockhart. Steve, could you just That was a very pathetic wave, and I know this isn't about Steve, but what an inspirational individual and a good friend, and it's nice to actually have time to get out and hike with him again. I also want to acknowledge the person that actually translated a vision similar to NatureBridge's vision for connecting children to nature, and that is my right arm at the Department of the Interior, who really oversaw our youth initiative. I get choked up because David Jewell, where are you? You're hiding in the back, as usual. Where is he? There he is. David did amazing work. And because of his work, we now have over 10 million young people playing, learning, serving, and working in the outdoors. And it's just a multiplication. Yes. Give him a big hug. And then give him a jump. Anyway, going to D.C., giving up your life, giving up your career is difficult. And it's a real sacrifice. So I appreciate David. I appreciate Warren, my husband. You can wave too. Poor Warren. There's my partner in this journey. I went from this very intense job with a lot of staff, and he went from having a lot of free time to being cooped up in the car with me for 2.5 months on a road trip across the country. So he needs some hugs too. And the other person I want to acknowledge that's here, and perhaps there are others too, but Sarah Creechpalm of the National Park Service. Sarah, were you superintendent? Here she is, back there. Back there by the bar. Can't imagine why. Are there other men and women of the National Park Service or public lands, state, federal, otherwise? Could you raise your hands? Thank you, Lee. Thank you. Others? These are our public servants, and they don't get the credit that they deserve in any administration, but they dedicate their lives to working in a very complicated world. Government is not a business. I've run a business. I've worked in government. It's not supposed to be a business. It's supposed to listen. It's supposed to represent all American people. It's supposed to hold public meetings, interminable public meetings. Can't imagine for Sarah and her predecessors on the Elwha Dam how many public meetings would have been held on that project, but this is what our public servants do. And to say they are underappreciated all the time is an understatement. To say they are underappreciated right now in our present day, I think is clearly doesn't do justice to what we're seeing in terms of budgets and so on. So thank you, public servants, at every level, elected, not elected, former, current, and those who work for government at every level. Can we just give them a big round of applause? So, all of you are here because you care. You represent many organizations. You represent government, the private sector, the nonprofit community. You are volunteers, you're donors. Sometimes you're volunteering by getting kids into the outdoors. You're volunteering by doing trail work. You are volunteering your time on boards. You're giving money. You're giving your heart and soul. And you all represent people that care about creating a generation of young people who care about this one planet that we have. And to quote my former colleague, John Kerry, there is no planet B. We've only got one. I know that Stephen Hawking thinks we should be migrating, but it's going to take a while. We have an astronaut in the room. She will understand that. So thank you for your commitment to building environmental education in young people, helping all of us understand the importance of our role in environmental stewardship. It is very, very important. So I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. I wasn't born here. I was born in the UK, but I grew up here. And my parents, literally, when we moved from England, my father said to his colleagues at the time at the University of Washington, well, what do people do here? And actually, one of the reasons he picked the United States is because he really liked baseball caps, which, by the way, he never wore. But said they camp and they hike. That's what they do. And he said, well, what's that about? And they said, well, you go down to this little store called REI, which was, he joined member number 17249 in 1959, when it was in the Green Apple Pie above the Green Apple Pie Market on Pike Street downtown. But he understood the connection to nature that's a gift that we have here in the Pacific Northwest. And so growing up, I was sent away to, they weren't ordinary camps. They were Mrs. Black and Mr. Black, who drove the bus and actually took me to the Enumclaw Hospital when I climbed a tree and broke my arm. But they had scientists with us. They were marine biologists when we were camping out on Obstruction Island in the San Juans when it was uninhabited. They were botanists and silviculturists who helped us identify the trees. And when we got the scientific name of a tree right, we got a piece of beef jerky, the little ends from Alberta. We hiked across the Olympic Peninsula from Dosey Wallops out through Graves Creek to Quinault. These were experiences that shaped me in 1,000 different ways. That's what NatureBridge is doing. It's what Islandwood is doing. The YMCA, the Scouts, the campfire, you name it. It's making a huge difference. And it's something, the connection to land, the importance of taking care of land, is something that the indigenous people, not only of this nation, but all nations, have understood since time immemorial. So for us interlopers, we're learning, and it's taken us a while, and some of those lessons are painful. How many tribal members do we have here? It's too bad. I hope there are a few. I hope there will be a few. But I had the privilege of working with lots and lots of tribes in this last job. And oh my goodness, what a lot of wisdom that we can unlock. I was with a tribal leader on we were actually in Washington, D.C. Ron Allen, many of you probably know him. He is from the region, I think it's Jamestown, Sklallam tribe, but very close to the Lower Elwha, Klallam. And he actually teared up, which, as you've noticed, I do all the time. He, however, doesn't. And he talked about just getting very emotional as he watched that river delta grow. And as he talked to an elder who lived above the eroding seashore about how the seashore was no longer eroding, he was getting land back, and how powerful that was, and how not just the salmon that we all saw, those of us, certainly Linda saw, bumping into the Elwha Dam, or the, is that right? This is the Elwha Dam, and then the upper one was the, Glines Canyon, and the Elwha. Bumping into that, and how far upriver those fish are now going, and how the whole ecosystem is repairing itself so quickly. And what a wonderful experience for the kids at NatureBridge to witness this in real time. So it's pretty extraordinary. Today, Steve and I and John Hoekstra and Warren, John, the head of the Mountains to Town Greenway, were hiking along the middle fork of the Snoqualmie River. And Steve will probably attest. He's a son of Yosemite from the Bay Area, but I know another very important NatureBridge site. But this is an area that in a lot of other places would be a national park because of its incredible beauty. And I worked on the Greenway for over 20 years, and we took it for granted. There were meth labs, there were cars in the river, and these are areas that are now open to the public in a really profound way. And I thought, I'm going to bring my grandson back here soon, because there's a lot of fun areas to play. It's also a place that I was out doing a photo shoot when I was at REI for, it turns out, Southwest Airline magazine. And let's just say that the photographer was not familiar with the terrain of the Pacific Northwest, and I was very late for an appointment with Bill Bradley. And I thought, Bill Bradley, I mean, he's a giant of a guy and a giant in so many ways. And so I literally left the photographer on top, carried some of his equipment, ran down from Rattlesnake Ledge, where we'd been doing the photo shoot, put the stuff by the side of the car, jumped in the car, did not have time for a shower even though I needed one, and had my suit, went to the bathroom in the Olympic Hotel to change clothes, and realized I forgot my shoes. So Bill Bradley was gracious enough to say, of course you're wearing hiking boots, because, why wouldn't you be? Anyway, thank you, Bill, for, even though my cover was blown, you were gracious about it. And then I want to tell a quick story also about the Greenway and Dan Evans. Dan is an incredible mentor to millions of us in the state of Washington, probably our best known politician. When people are talking about their political affiliation in the state of Washington, they typically will say, I'm an Evans Republican. And everybody here knows what that means. So Dan told me a story about the Greenway, about something he did when he was, I think, around 10 years old. Dan, you can correct me. And that was that he was out with the Boy Scouts doing some tree planting. Now, I-90 would not have been there. It would have been along the Sunset Highway. It was probably out by North Bend, or North Bend, Snoqualmie, in that area. And he told me now, probably 15 years ago, that whenever he went out into the Greenway, he looked for his tree. So, Dan, I know I'm not blowing your cover because you're in Wikipedia, but let's just say that tree is more than 80 years old. It's pretty amazing. But the story that I have retold, that Dan told me, is something for all of us to pay attention to, which is how an experience like planting a tree when you're 10 years old shapes your life when you're in your 9th decade, or in your 6th decade, or whatever decade you may be in. And that's why this work is so important. And of course, we will be celebrating soon the Daniel J. Evans Wilderness in Olympic National Park. So a word about NatureBridge. I got to know NatureBridge really when it was the Yosemite Park Institute and the Olympic Park Institute. And then when it became NatureBridge, and I got well acquainted with Steve, and he started working me over, which was absolutely the right thing to do. I was delighted to see them expand beyond these places that are, they're a long drive from population centers, and to start thinking about how do we reach kids in, LA and Ventura County as they are now with Santa Monica Mountains. or the Channel Islands, where I was out with a group of kids as Interior Secretary, where we saw the endangered Channel Islands fox that had been brought back from the brink of extinction, and what amazing lessons these kids were learning. And all of them were not from Santa Barbara, but the other side of the mountains, and almost 100% of them were farm worker family kids, and they could answer every single question about the Channel Islands fox. And they were identifying birds for me as well, which was pretty cool. But Prince William Forest Park, about a 30-mile drive from Washington, D.C., is special in many dimensions. It's special because NatureBridge now has a facility there. It's special because it was a CCC project, and I just wish we would have brought back the CCC in 2009. With the help of David Jewell and a number of corporations, we did create 100,000 jobs for young people, and we did get a lot of people out there. But Prince William Forest Park was created in the 30s during the Great Depression as a nature education center for children. And they weighed children every day because children were starving. They were malnourished. So it was about nutrition. It was about environment. They dug swimming pools for the kids. They did water quality analysis. They identified trees. And it was a totally segregated camp. They had equal facilities for blacks and whites. And I'm not sure if you weren't black or white what happened to you. But the CCC workers who were black built the black camp, white built the white camp. They were identical, so it was in the separate but equal phase. But to have NatureBridge there now, teaching children about what happened there in the 30s, is pretty extraordinary. So I encourage you, whether it's NatureBridge or the other organizations I mentioned, the Scouts, which shaped a lot of Steve's young life, or the Campfire, or YMCA, or you name the many organizations out there, I encourage you to get out there, to help them, to bring kids out, to be a part of this directly yourself. So today is actually about partnerships. It's about bipartisanship. It's about tribes and local communities and Republicans and Democrats currently serving in office, formerly in office, with two giants, a Republican and a Democrat, speaking together later on today about the importance of cooperation. And we are listening to each other with an example in the Elwha, not a moment too soon. You look at the ability of Mother Nature to recover when we look at what we did and how we reversed that, and how extraordinary an example we have right in our own backyard. And we need to replicate that in the Klamath, where we've created an administrative path for 4 dams to come out because it didn't get done in Congress, even though there was tremendously hard work and bipartisanship and cooperation, but it didn't get across the finish line. We need more courage to do the things that are right. And I think that the 2 extraordinary people that we're going to hear from in the big hall in a little while will demonstrate that kind of courage and inspire all of us to have that kind of courage to stand up for the things that we believe in. Because you can't do work without collaboration. NatureBridge wouldn't be successful without many of you, and the organizations you represent would not be successful without many people that pull on those oars to row that ship in the same direction. Otherwise, as you know, it just goes around in circles. So the Elwha had bipartisan support. It had legislation. It was signed into law by a Republican president. It was implemented under both Republican and Democratic administrations. I've noticed that everyone takes credit for it now, but that wasn't actually the case, as our guest speakers will say. And as Rachel Carson once said, in nature, nothing exists alone. And so thank you for being part of that very large village. Thank you for the difference that you make in the volunteer work you do, in your reason for being here, in the service that you provide to the next generation. So we can, in fact, have a generation of people that recognize there is no planet B, and that everybody needs to play a part in perhaps undoing the damage that we may have done, and in shaping a brighter future, not just for them, and we'll be long gone, but for generations to come. And I'm going to leave you with my favorite quote. I don't know who it's attributed to, but it really shaped a lot of the decisions that I've made over the last 4 years, and that is that we don't inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. Thank you.
A lot of cooperation happened tonight, and Sally, thank you so much for your words. We also have wonderful members of our host committee that did some heavy troweling for us: Rhoda Alton and Corey Carlson, Eve and Chap Elvard, Valerie and Bill Anders, Susie and Norm Dix, Dan and Nancy Evans, Roger and Allison Frey, Becky and Robert Gates, Robert and Sue Holmes, Sally and Warren Jewell, Martha Consgard and Peter Goldman, Greg and Mary Moga, TC and Keith Richmond, and Bonnie and Jim Town. Thank you so much for your support. And I'd also like to really recognize the sponsors that helped us out today: Starbucks, THG, and Schweitzer Mountain Resorts, West Monroe Partners, and Purpose were our corporate sponsors, and partners that joined us to make this happen tonight were the Mountaineers and Mountaineers Books, National Park Conservation Associations, Mountains of Sound Greenway, the Trust for Public Lands, American Rivers, Forterra, Defenders of Wilderness, Washington Wild, the Wilderness Society, Sierra Club, Olympic Park Associates, the Washington Wildlife and Recreation Coalition, and our friends from Edelman, J-Lore Wines, and Elysian Brewing. So thanks so much for all of your support. The big hall is waiting for our arrival, and we have a few minutes to get there. And our pathway is, if you see Janelle and the tallest man in the room except for Senator Bradley, we should proceed immediately following them, and each of you has a ticket inside your name tag, and you will be seated at that specific seat. Thank you very much.
Where did she go? I want to